So welcome and thank you for joining us for today's ConnectCare3 conversation. We're calling this a weighty conversation, and it's beyond the scale. With us today are Taylor McCormick and John Lawton. They're our certified health coaches here at ConnectCare3. So we're glad to have them share their expertise with you, our clients, today. You know, I wonder what you all think when we say beyond the scale, because I would venture that every one of us has been on the scale and have been disheartened and discouraged and criticized ourselves and said, I'm not exercising enough, I'm not eating the right foods, I'm not hydrating enough, and we just berate ourselves. So I'm excited for you to hear from John and Taylor today about a different way to look at things. You might call it a paradigm shift. So with that, let's get started. So I guess we want to start with BMI. What do you think? Taylor, what can you tell us about BMI and those thoughts that you have?
Sure. It's really a ratio between your height and weight, and it's something that has been used as kind of a standard when you go to the doctor's office. Doctor will weigh you, take your height, and they'll maybe spit out a number at you, and it'll give you your BMI. And there's different categories of BMI. And the thing is, that isn't necessarily the only indicator of your health or risk factor for certain chronic diseases. So, for example, if you think of someone, let's take an athlete, for example, and then someone who's sedentary, they have the same height and weight profiles, everything's the same. Their BMI is going to be the same, but their health is going to be completely different. So that's just one example of how BMI may not be the sole indicator of your health.
So really, you're talking about health, not just the scale.
Yes.
BMI.
Yep.
Very good. So kind of to take a whole different approach, let's talk about the scale for a minute. So John, how do you coach your clients about using a scale? Because it's part of it, but it's not the whole story is what I'm hearing from you both.
Yes. So as far as using the scale, I typically recommend to my clients to weigh, if they are going to use the scale as a number, to weigh themselves once a week and not go day to day, because each day your weight can fluctuate as much to 5 pounds per day, which is pretty drastic. And also, in doing some of the research Taylor and I were doing, we actually had seen up to potentially 20 pounds, but just keeping the 5 pounds as an more accurate fluctuation in your weight. I also kind of wanted to touch a little bit on the BMI as well, the different classifications. So there's underweight, which is anything under 18.5. Then the normal is 18.5 to 24.9. Overweight, you fall into the 25 to 29.9. And then anything over 30 is considered obese. And in one of the articles that I was reading, that it says even above 30, classification as being obese, like Taylor touched on, the athletes, they could potentially, show up as being obese, but they got that muscle mass. However, that study showed that over 35, typically at that point, it's more likely to be distributed more as fat than muscle. Okay. So those are kind of rough numbers. And then even being pregnant, you can show up as being in the obese category, but obviously you're carrying an extra person with you.
Right, exactly. So there's some limitations to BMI.
Sure.
Sounds like there's some advantages, to use for research. I'd like to just backtrack for just a moment, and maybe you could explain how people determine a BMI. What are those numbers that get used? We're talking about the scale. So.
Sure. So it's your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared, and then that would give you your BMI from that. And then based off your score, you could place yourself on the scales that John just mentioned as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. It kind of gives some context, some numbers to all of that. So again, the the BMI is a tool
Mhm.
with some limitations. We talked about weight fluctuations. Is there anything that causes those? So like if I was trying to lose weight and I saw I went up 5 pounds one day and it goes down another 3 pounds another day, what might cause that, either one of you?
Sure. So it can depend on a lot of factors. One is your nutrition. So if you had a meal that was higher in sodium one day, or maybe a higher carbohydrate meal, because our body stores carbs within our muscle tissue and also stores water with those carbs. So you're adding additional water weight there. For females, it can fluctuate based on hormone levels. Maybe you slept differently the night before. There are really a number of factors that contribute to that fluctuation on the scale. So I always like to remind my clients, don't necessarily panic. Let's look at the trends over time, and then we can gather information and make the next best step from there.
It's trends over time.
Yeah.
So you can get on the scale and not berate yourself, right?
Yes. Yep.
That sounds like a good plan, very much so. As we continue to talk about this, is there any way that you'd like a client to kind of reframe how they think about the scale, John?
Yeah, just keep in mind it's not necessarily about that number. It can be how you feel from day to day versus, judging the weight. And, you might feel more energetic and be able to focus more on one aspect of your nutrition or one aspect of your exercise to help you with gaining traction with your overall health. It's not just about the weight, because there's tons of different things that go into your weight, which we'll get into talking about the difference between fat, bone, and muscle.
So body composition, but it really sounds like the theme here is what's someone's health, and the scale is just part of that measurement, but not the total measurement. So with that, let's take your segue into body composition. And what are those different components, Taylor? That's a big word. I don't know if that's not a common way we talk. So help our clients to understand that.
Yeah, so when you're stepping on the scale and you see that number fluctuating, it could really be a number of things. So you have your fat mass, your lean muscle tissue, and then also your bone mass. So when we're looking to lose weight, we're hopefully losing it from that fat mass. We don't necessarily want to lose our muscle tissue or bone. It just wouldn't be great in the long run. So those are the three components or areas that you can potentially lose.
Okay, so you're really looking to lose fat, not muscle, not bone, and you might lose some water weight in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I wonder, what are some ways that people measure those aspects of body composition, John?
Yes, so there's plenty of different ways to measure, and thank goodness for acronyms. I love this one for the DEXA. It's the dual energy X-ray absorptiometry.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah, so that's considered like the gold standard, but there's also skin fold calipers. There's the bod pod and hydrostatic weighing. There's a bunch of different methods. So we're going to cover a little bit of the pros and cons of each one of those. So
okay. Take it away and dig deeper into those.
One of the other methods, like John touched on, are the skin fold calipers, and those are a convenient way. That's probably one of the more accessible ways of measuring. However, you also do have to have someone perform the measurements that's well trained for consistency, because there can be a large fluctuation in those measurements, and it also can be a little bit invasive because maybe you're having to take off layers of clothes to expose certain areas. It is measured based off of certain sites on the body. So there's different regions that they'll look at, and then from that they can calculate a rough estimate of your body fat percentage. And again, I always like to say those aren't necessarily accurate, but just can be used as a baseline of where you're at. And as long as the measurements are standard and as accurate as possible, you can go from there.
So really, again, it takes you back to our theme. It's beyond the scale, isn't it? Mm-hmm. There's different ways to measure someone's health and their potential risk for diseases that none of us want, like heart disease or type 2 diabetes. So with that, I'd like to just segue in. We've talked about some of the facts of beyond the scale. We've talked about how to measure body composition. We've talked about the BMI, those different tools. Is there anything that either of you would like to add to about those facts, kind of laying a foundation before we get into some of the application for our clients of this information?
Yes, I would like to add in that there's some healthy ranges for body fat percentage. Like Taylor had mentioned, doing the skin fold calipers measures your subcutaneous fat. So there's two different locations of fat. It's the subcutaneous, which is right below the skin, but then there's the visceral, which is also mainly the belly fat, or also known as the central obesity. So we want to try and keep our ranges for men ages 20 to 39. The range is 8 to 19%. For women, it's going to be 21 to 32%. For ages 40 to 59 in men, it's going to be 11 to 21%. And then for women, it's going to be 23 to 33%. And then 60 to 79, the ranges are 13 to 24%, and 24 for men. And for women, it's going to be 24 to 35%. So just kind of keeping those in mind as, determined as the healthier ranges for your body fat percentages.
Again, it's that understanding those different parts of our body composition and measuring it to accurately understand what's the level of health, it sounds like. And as you talk about visceral fat, I was reading just the other day how it's John, you talked about the fat that's just under the skin, and the visceral fat is kind of wrapped around the organs in the abdomen. It's hard. It's very different, and I know sometimes that's a health concern because it can cause other problems. Next, I think I'd like to segue. Now that we've covered those facts, and thanks for adding those numbers, John. I know you love numbers. So now let's talk about some kind of the practical applications, some tips. What are some other ways to measure progress beyond the scale? Taylor.
Sure. We can work on nutrition, exercise, sleep. I think those are some of the key big areas that you can really start to make great progress in. And from there can create some momentum and success going forward. One of my personal favorites to start with is the area of nutrition. I like showing or kind of helping people to reframe their mindset that we're not going on a diet. So if you go on a diet, the way I look at that is you're eating a certain pattern for a certain amount of time to lose X amount of weight. And then we revert back to previous eating behaviors. Rather, with how I like to hopefully reframe, we're starting to create sustainable habits that are meant to be continued and developed over a lifetime. So really starting small and then expanding to see where we can go from there.
Well, I think you used a key word as reframing, and I think this entire ConnectCare3 conversation is about reframing the scale, reframing how we measure success, reframing how do I go about becoming healthier. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty exciting to me. Those shifts, paradigm shifts, I like to call them, very much so. John, is there a way, let's say, what are lifestyle modifications that can impact these non-scale wins and body composition, those things we've been talking about?
And another one would be obviously exercise.
Okay.
And so, again, the exercise will release the feel-good hormones, helping you feel better, reducing stress. And again, it's not on the scale, but you can feel better overall. And many of you may know the recommendations being 150 minutes of cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory training each week at a moderate intensity, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity. And that's typically just to kind of maintain your weight. And for untrained individuals, you can, like if you're completely sedentary and making the transition to beginning exercise, you may see some weight loss with increased activity, obviously. But once you get to the 150 minutes, you might hit a plateau. So therefore, you would obviously need to potentially increase your minutes exercised. And that can be up to, 300 minutes of cardiovascular training each week, which, sounds like a lot, but if you've got the right mindset, again, like Taylor has said multiple times, reframing that mindset that you're looking for overall better health, you'll do what it takes to achieve that and achieve those goals of yours. Keep it individualized. And also don't forget to do resistance training as well. It's not one or the other necessarily. It's incorporating both cardiorespiratory and also the resistance training. And that might look like 2 to 3 days of resistance training each week, performing multiple sets, 2 to 4 sets of maybe 10 to 15 repetitions per set, and 8 to 10 different exercises per session. So
I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit here with a question as I sit here and I think about being a client, think about my own time and learning to manage that and be healthy. If I had to choose between cardio and resistance, what would you want me to understand about each of those? Maybe the advantages, and maybe it depends upon my goal, but I'm just a little bit curious. How would you coach someone who is feeling like they need to choose between the two, or figure out how to make them both work in a full life? Either one of you.
Sure. I would try to help them find a happy medium of both. So let's say you're short on time, maybe that looks like a full body resistance or weightlifting routine, and then maybe we can add a little bit of cardio in on the end of that, or add some interval training so you're getting a little bit more of that dose of intensity, so you're not having to spend as much time walking or on the treadmill, elliptical. So there's ways we can kind of combine the two and make it work to fit your schedule. But I'd also encourage clients, the minutes of daily activity or physical activity, walking farther to get into the store, those do add up over time. So don't necessarily discount those too much as well.
So a full schedule is no excuse. It feels like it some days. So there's ways to really maximize the time, maybe with increased weight but less reps or sets. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Adding the steps throughout the day.
Fit it in there. We'll come up with a plan.
I like the high intensity interval training as well, because not only are you burning lots of calories during that session, but also beyond that session. So up to 24, maybe even 72 hours later, you're still reaping some of the benefits from that, vigorous high intensity workout. So
listening to that term, high intensity workout, and we've used medium intensity workout. I've done some reading, like it's whether or not you can talk while you exercise. I don't know, is that true? What's the difference between, how do you define those terms for our clients?
So the moderate intensity exercise is pretty much based on 50 to 70% of your heart rate maximum. And that's just a guide, an easy way to figure it out. So to figure out your estimated heart rate maximum, you would take 220 minus your age. So that's your estimated heart rate max. And then 50 to 70% of that would be moderate intensity, and then 70 to 85% would be the vigorous intensity.
So breathing a little bit heavier.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for defining those terms and those numbers.
Sure.
Once again, John, that's great. So I'm curious, how does nutrition, maybe Taylor, how about you? Since you said nutrition is kind of the place you like to start, and Don was focused on exercise. How does nutrition impact overall health and body composition?
Sure. So I'm sure we've all heard that a calorie is a calorie. That's something that I'm passionate about trying to help convey the message to my clients of, sure, a calorie is coming from more processed foods, but we have more, less processed whole foods. You're going to get a better nutritional value from those whole foods. So you're going to maybe get some fiber, less saturated fats, less refined sugars, those types of things. So I really like to try to help my clients. And again, it's not, we're not taking leaps and bounds as we start, but maybe we start to look at how can we start to incorporate a little bit more of those whole foods into your diet, some of those lean proteins, fruits and veggies, and then go from there. And again, maybe it's picking one meal or one snack to start to start, it's not overhauling their whole diet or eating patterns to begin with.
So it's small changes with whole foods. Could you give some examples of whole foods versus the processed foods? Because contrasting them can be so helpful for people to understand.
Sure. So if we're looking at a serving of fruit, so you can have 100% fruit juice, or you could also eat a whole apple. So with that apple, you're also getting additional fiber from the skin. Processed foods, you could take a look at, for example, maybe some of the processed breakfast meats like bacon, those types of things, and really start to make your own choices there. So the closer it is to the whole, the origin of the food. Thank you. I was struggling with my words there. The more nutritional value you can expect to get.
Okay, well, thanks for giving some practical examples, Taylor. You know, the one thing that I've also, in some research that I've done recently, is about sleep and the impact on health and weight. John, is there something you could address about that?
Yes. So sleep, it can impact a bunch of different things, anywhere from, the hunger hormones leading to even your dietary choices. So, it's important to get that regular sleep. And for adults, the recommendation is 7 to 9 hours per night. And, with our busy schedules and kids and whatever you got going on, it's important to, get that restful night's sleep each and every night. And some of the techniques that I recommend to clients are to, if you're a scroller at night on social media or whatever, maybe put your phone down 30 to 60 minutes prior to wanting to fall asleep. Turn out your light and maybe use a small little light for reading, and read a book before going to bed, because it's going to, be beneficial for you. And also you could even journal your progress that you've made throughout the day. Did you take one of Taylor's tips for nutrition, or, did you do a little additional exercise that day? That way you can always look back at a later date and see, where you were as you started, or, if you've already been active, whatever it might be, to where you are at a later date. So, really take advantage of that time before bed to kind of wind down and, go to bed at the same time, get up in the morning at the same time, be consistent.
Yes, that routine and that running to the technology. Your comment about journaling, I was reminded of a study where people, when they journaled, if they journaled about what they were grateful for or what went well, how different their health was, and their mental well-being, their mood. After 3 weeks in a study, it was very different than those people who just journaled about anything. So I think that focus of the journaling that you mentioned, John, is really key to help overall health with our minds as well as our bodies. So,
right.
Yeah, good point. We've talked about facts, we've talked about the scale, we've talked about non-scale wins. Just if you could quickly recap, maybe, Taylor, what are the non-scale wins that we're talking about? And then we'll go on and begin to wrap things up.
Sure. So looking at non-scale wins, that could be, are you making progress with your nutrition? Are you, for exercise, has that increased for you? Are you sleeping better? How are your energy levels? Has your mood improved? Are your clothes fitting better? Those types of things. We can really start to pinpoint those, and then that helps build confidence and success moving forward.
So with weighing our clients, weighing themselves once a week, understanding weight fluctuations, and knowing those other non-scale wins, which are huge, as you have learned from your clients and I've seen as well, it's really a setup for success, isn't it? So as we talk about success, we're just going to begin to wrap things up. What are some key takeaways that you want our clients to have today? Be inspired by. John, let's start with you.
Okay. So one of the most popular questions that I frequently get from my clients is, how do I lose that belly fat or the flab on the back of my arms and things like that? And there's no like one particular exercise that you can do to focus on that one area. It's not a one, doing 100 crunches isn't going to help you lose the belly fat. It's an overall, between nutrition, exercise, getting the proper sleep. So to feel better, and I just think it's a big takeaway to incorporate all aspects of your health rather than focus on necessarily just one. But also at the same point, like Taylor said, if you're at a point right now where things are really crazy and hectic, take time to focus on one small goal each week and improve on those. Maybe spend a month on that one goal each week. And once you've nailed that down, then pick another one. So don't overwhelm yourself. I think that's a big takeaway too. Just, really do what's within your limits, but also stretch yourself a little bit at the same time.
So I'm going to ask you to be more specific, John. You've said, let's just pick one thing for an amount of time.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yep.
What's an example? Maybe that one of your clients has had or that you have. Just an example for our people to understand.
Yep. We like to use SMART goals. So, being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So if someone says, I want to exercise more, that's pretty vague. So to change that, it might look like I will exercise 3 days a week for 30 minutes for a month. So now we have specific goals that are measurable, timely, relevant, and attainable. So, just really focusing on those SMART goals.
Okay, thanks for making that specific. And I think I would probably want to do 15 minutes 3 times a week for a month and see how I do.
Sure.
But, again, it's the autonomy of the client, isn't it?
Yes.
So, I'm giving you a hard time. Yes. Taylor, a key takeaway for you as well that you want people to go away with that maybe they'll remember 3 months from now or 6 months from now.
I think my takeaway would be that your progress is not solely rooted in that number on the scale. So really keep in the back of your mind, what are those non-scale wins that we can focus on, and then really stay focused on the process, not the outcome goal. So similar to what John said, make those small steps along the way versus thinking of how far you have to go to reach whatever that goal may be for yourself.
So great. So if I'm in process, I can journal about that process.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. It all full circle. So.
And not get on the scale and berate myself.
Yes.
I can do it a whole different way again, which is that paradigm shift. So, you both have talked about how it's an overall picture. It is weight. That is part of it, but it's not the whole story. We're beyond the scale. It's sleep. It's what we eat. It's our exercise. I can't do, most people can't, that's overwhelming. So how do you help clients to know where to start? And maybe I'd love to hear from both of you on that.
So I would say, I always ask my clients, where do you want to start? What's going to be the easiest place, the less area of resistance for you? Maybe time is an issue. So maybe we start with the nutrition piece. So we can start small there, and you have time built out that you're eating meals throughout the day. So we're not really having to add the time stress to that. So yes, I leave that up to my clients, and then we build a plan from there, maybe of when we're starting to have conversations about when do we build that next step in that next category.
So your clients have a lot of autonomy. You're really hearing them and what's important to them, their values, and how that drives their choices as a health coach.
Yes. I was going to say, I think that's just so important for them to buy into the process and what we're working towards, and to help them build their confidence moving forward.
So there's no recipe for success. It's very spaced, very individually.
Ingredients, but no recipe.
Oh, I like that. I haven't heard that before. John, what would you like someone to take away? I know you talked about being as specific about a goal. I honed in on that a little bit. Is there anything that you want to add that people will be like, oh, I remember John saying that, not 9 months from now or 12 months from now?
Yeah. And I always hear Taylor say this, and, meeting the clients where they're at, talking at the cubicles and stuff here, we communicate all the time, and I always hear her say that. So I hear that a lot, and I use that as well. But with my background and having the exercise as medicine concept as well, like it's sit less, move more. And if you sit back and look at it, 30 minutes a day is 2% of your entire 24-hour period. So with exercise as medicine, they even say that you can break up those time frames. So if you look at your day and say, oh, I can't do 30 minutes all at once, we'll break it up and do 3 10-minute sessions. And that might look like you get 2 15-minute breaks and an hour lunch. So on your 2 15-minute breaks, go for a 10-minute walk on each of them. And then during your hour lunch, do the other 10 minutes. And you've got your 30 minutes for the day. So really taking time to break things up throughout the day. And maybe when you're sitting and watching TV in the evening, you could even add in some exercise there. So, pick apart your day, and it doesn't have to be all in one sitting.
So really what I hear for beyond the scale wins, as I begin to sum up, there's a lot of small steps that can be made that will impact someone's health. They can sleep better, they might move better, they might think better, they might feel better, they're eating healthier, and they're really just small steps. So there's again, it's those paradigm shifts that change in mindset about what becoming healthier looks like, and it is beyond the scale and the non-scale wins. And I really appreciate both of you sharing your coaching expertise, actually, the things you've learned through your education, but also what you've learned from working with clients and their successes, and you coaching them along. So I want to thank you for sharing that today, and also thank our clients for listening. And we're looking forward to them being inspired and having those mindset changes that they produce those non-scale wins themselves. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.